Hello everyone, welcome to the fifth video on governance and management of IT. In this video, we will cover these three topics: IT service provider, acquisition and management, outsourcing and third-party audit reports, and last will be cloud governance. So let's get started with IT service provider. Yeah. So guys, this is a topic which is very important, again from your CISA exam perspective, as well as from the real life perspective, with more and more companies planning to go and use more of the third parties and keeping the organization leaner and meaner. And hence this is a subject which will be very useful in your real life as well. So as far as guys IT function is concerned, the delivery and the execution of that function can be in three different models. First model is insourced. Insourced model means where whatever IT services you need, you hire employees, IT employees to execute, to perform those services. So this is called insourced. Everybody is within the organization, as far as the payroll is concerned. Outsourced means where you actually outsource the IT services to a third party. There are many companies which are providing IT outsourcing services like Infosys, Wipro, and there are many. So that is called outsourcing, when instead of hiring your own IT team, you give the entire contract to a third party, which is an expert in providing these services. So that is called outsourcing. Hybrid model, guys, is the one where you use the mix of both, insourced and outsourced. So what happens here? A portion of staff, of IT staff, is your own employees, and a portion of services are outsourced. Normally, guys, hybrid model is used where is used as a combination where the in-source staff manages the operation. So they are like, they are responsible for monitoring, and the actual execution, the actual performance of IT services, it is outsourced. So in general, you will see that this is how the hybrid model is used: management in-house, execution outsourced. Okay, in general, but that's not hard and fast rule. Now, there's another way, guys, to look at the IT service provider acquisition. There are three options available as far as the geography is concerned, right? So depending upon where your IT service team is located, you can categorize them into on-site, off-site, and offshore. On-site means all your IT staff, they are coming to office, they are coming to the place where you have your entire IT setup laid down. So whether it is in your corporate office, or you may have a server farm located somewhere else, so wherever you have that the physical site, the IT team comes there to perform their role and responsibility. So that is called on-site. Off-site means your IT team is not physically coming to the actual location, but they are around, right? So they are in the same geographic area, but they are off-site. So they are not physically coming to the place of work. They may be working from home, they may be working from another city, but it's geographically it is the same region. Similar to off-site, guys, is offshore, where again the IT team is not coming to office, is not coming to the place of work where the client's setup is. They're providing that services remotely. But here you call it offshore when it is absolutely different geographic region itself. For example, when if a company, say, is based in US and is being supported by say Infosys or Wipros of the world, based out of, say, Bangalore or Delhi or Gurgaon or Noida, whatever. So then it is called offshore, where it is not only offsite, but it is in a different region. So the company is based in US, but the IT services team is based here in Noida, Delhi, Gurgaon, or maybe Bangalore, maybe Calcutta, and so on. So that's how you distinguish between the three. Now, quickly looking at the another important topic, which is the outsourcing. Why companies prefer to outsource their IT services? There are various reasons, guys. Yeah. First reason is it helps in cost cutting, because there are various costs which are involved if you have your in-house IT team, and that cost includes obviously payroll cost, the office space, electricity, food, all those things, and you can save that cost. And many times the outsourcing cost is lower than the complete cost. When you look at the complete cost payable to employee, including their PF, ESI, health insurance, lot of overheads are involved where in case of having the IT team as in-house. So every company does cost benefit analysis. Sometimes depending upon the strategy of the organization, it is beneficial to have in-source. Sometimes it is beneficial to have outsource. So there is no black and white rule, guys, here. It's a cost benefit analysis every company has to do, and that is some very similar to decision you make while deciding whether you will make a particular thing or you will buy a particular thing, whether you will go for a construction linked construction linked loan, or whether you will take a ready to move in apartment. So just like very similar to that. Yeah. Another advantage of outsourcing is your organization becomes leaner, right? And hence you becomes more agile as the industry requirement and demand changes. In case you are using outsourcing partner, you can quickly change your model as well. Yeah, so this is a great advantage. It enables focus on core business, because then the leadership bandwidth is not consumed in managing the problems of IT, IT service management. Yeah, enhances service quality, provided you have service provider is someone who is reputed in the market and has good quality SLAs and all those things. So guys, as every strategy has pros and cons. Yeah, so there are some risks and disadvantages of outsourcing as well. What are those? Firstly, companies lose control on their IT setup, as well as there's a risk of loss of information, or risk of unauthorized access of information, because when the IT services are provided by third party, then there are more number of people who can access your company's information and data. So that sometimes becomes a challenge, and hence we'll talk about some of the additional controls later. And hence the companies take a very, very calculated risk, very, very calculated call in terms of which services to outsource and which type of services to insource. Yeah, that's a very delicate balance which every company maintains, keeping in mind the advantages and disadvantages of the outsourcing as a practice. Yeah. With that, we'll move to the related topic, which is outsourcing and the third-party audit reports. Yeah, this is again, guys, very, very important concept, and very important from your CISA exam plus your real life. Once you go into IS audit space and governance space, you will hear more and more about this. So first we'll start this by discussing a question, which is why it is not feasible for IS auditors of the client organization to audit ITGC of third party. So let's take an example. Say your company has outsourced the IT organization to, say, Infosys or Wipros or HCL of the world. Whatever then controls, IT controls, you would have tested within your organization. Why can't you go to Infosys, Wipro, HCL and other companies to audit them? Technically, yes, you can go and audit them because they are providing services. Hence, the control which had to be in-house, those controls they have to implement. So technically, yes, you can go and audit them. But practically that becomes very, very difficult for the third party. Why? It is because you are not the only company they are supporting. From their entire setup, they may be supporting tens or 20s or hundreds of the organization by providing similar services. Now just think about it. If all of those clients, if they send their IS auditors to test ITGC, then this third party will end up just getting itself audited the entire year. And if you take a step back, you will realize that all those clients, they want to get the exactly same controls tested. What are those controls like? Whether the backup of my data is happening or not, whether restoration testing is happening or not, whether proper antivirus controls are there or not, whether ransomware related controls have been put in place or not, whether password security is there or not, whether user access rights are periodically reviewed or not. So every company more or less will have the same type of ask. And hence, guys, practically none of the client organizations, none of them go and audit the third parties. So if they don't go, then who does the audit? So guys, that is where SSAE 18 report comes in. So what happens? This third party, they tell their clients, please don't, all of you don't come, one-on-one, one by one. We will get one comprehensive audit done. Yeah. And we will ensure that when we are getting that one audit done, we will take the samples from all of your data which we are processing. So if one company belongs to say Rajiv Gupta, another company belongs to say Anand, third company belongs to Mr. C, and so on. This service provider says, all of you please don't come for audit. When I am hiring a third party auditing company to audit once, I will ensure that when they're picking samples, they are picking samples from Rajiv Gupta company, Anand company, Mr. C company, D company, every company. So every company will get covered in that one single audit. So guys, this is the advantage of getting the SSAE audit done. Yeah. So this is one important concept which I wanted to explain. Then some of you who are already into the IS audit space or into the audit space, you may have heard the term called another audit report called SAS 70. It was working fine, but there was a limitation with SAS 70, and the limitation was it used to focus primarily on ICFR, internal controls over financial reporting. But it never used to focus that much on the operational controls, which means the IT general controls. And hence, it was replaced later by SSAE 18, which covers operational, which means IT general controls as well. Yeah. So this is the difference between SAS 70 and SSAE 18. Again, a very important differentiation for you to know from practical perspective as well. Now, within SSAE, guys, you have three type of audit reports, yeah, which are called SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. Yeah? And between these three type of audit report, guys, SOC 1 and SOC 2 are the most common. Okay, SOC 3 is not that common, and you will see here as well as in your practical life. So you can check for the third parties who are providing services to your organization. You can check which type of SSAE 18 report they are submitting. More often than not, it will be either SOC 1 or SOC 2, but very less frequently you will see SOC 3. Okay, so then what is SOC 1 report? So guys, SOC 1 report is similar to SAS 70 because here the report in this audit, the focus is on the controls relating to financial controls. Okay, so those are the control areas and generally SOC 1 report is submitted for those companies, for those third parties who are providing financial transaction support to your company. They may be doing, for example, purchase order processing, or they may be processing your vendor invoices, or they may be processing your payroll and so on. So they must be providing some financial services to your organization, and hence SOC 1 becomes relevant. Okay. Now, interestingly, within SOC 1 also, you have two type of reports. One type 1 report, guys, is called the design effectiveness. Type 1 report focusing on the design effectiveness, which means it looks at whether the process which is designed, standard operating procedures, process and controls, whether on paper, whether they look fine or not. As a design, do they look okay or not? And hence, guys, please keep in mind, it is called a point in time report as well, because when you are going to audit, you are looking at the standard operating procedures, RCMs existing at that point in time. Type 2 report, guys, is more comprehensive because it focuses not only on the standard operating procedure, it focuses not only on the design, it also checks whether that control is also working or not. And hence, it is the one where the sample testing is performed by picking samples from last 12 months. So this is how type 1 and type 2 reports are different. Type 1 is on the design, audits the design. Type 2 checks the on-ground effectiveness as well by picking samples. And both these types are of which report? SOC 1. SOC 1 focuses on what? Financial controls. So you're looking at financial controls, and then you're deciding that do I need to focus only on SOPs and RCM, or do I need to do sample checking also? If your scope of engagement, when you are hired by the client, when the scope is only to look at the process design, you issue type 1 audit report. But when you do sample testing as well, to check whether the control is working on ground or not, then it is called type 2 audit report. Very important differentiation, guys, and I expect question in the exam. It is very common. Then what is SOC 2 audit report, guys? SOC 2 is the one where you check, review the operational effectiveness, right? Operational, right? Not operational effectiveness, where you look at the operational controls, guys. Operational controls means you look at the IT general controls. And when I say IT general controls, guys, please remember, in IT general controls, we look at three things. CIA. ITGC means CIA: confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information systems. And we will dig deeper into it. In domain number 5, I will elaborate more on CIA. So just to draw distinction, SOC 1, financial controls. SOC 2, IT general controls. And IT general controls means CIA. Very high level differentiation. And so in SOC 2, you agreed, okay, SOC 2 means ITGC. Now what to do with ITGC? Do I need to just look at the design of ITGC or do the sample testing? Exactly same definition of type 1, type 2 report as in SOC 1. If the client has engaged you only to look at the design of ITGC, you issue type 1 report. But if you have been engaged to look at the samples also, then you issue type 2 audit report. So this type 1, type 2 definition is exactly same as you have read in the last slide. Okay. So far so good. And as I said, SOC 1 and SOC 2 are the most commonly used audits. And the third type of audit report is SOC 3. So SOC 3, guys, is again focuses on ITGC, which is same as SOC 2. But here in SOC 3, this is not created for a specific set of clients. So just to call out the differentiation. So guys, in SOC 1 and SOC 2, in the first few pages of the audit report itself, the auditor clearly calls out that while doing the sample testing, which all companies' samples were picked. And why he calls out? So that the audit report can be shared with those companies. So for example, my company name is say Success Accelerator. And if my service provider sends me a say SOC 2 audit report, in which in the introduction page, I don't see Success Accelerator's name, it means when the audit was performed, the samples for my company were not taken. So I may not find this audit report relevant. And hence you will see both in SOC 1 and SOC 2, the company's names are present. In SOC 3, it is not the case because it is prepared for public at large. Okay, so this is one important difference between SOC 2 and SOC 3 audit reports. Okay, so this is on, guys, on the SSAE 18 report, how it is different from SAS 70, and why we actually need SSAE 18. Why can't you and me simply go and audit all the service providers who are working for my client? Yeah, so this reasoning is very, very important for you to know. With that, guys, we'll move to the next topic, which is cloud governance. So as you know, the companies, yeah, which want to keep themselves leaner and meaner, and you see most of the the new age organizations, they want themselves to be lean and mean, whether you talk about the new startups or the super successful companies these days. They are not the ones which are spending billions and billions of dollars in setting up factories and so on. They are the ones which are saying how we can keep ourselves lean. And hence, guys, cloud computing is becoming very, very common, and it will keep growing with more and more companies becoming leaner. And hence, for you, people like you and me who audit, who give assurance that the information systems are secure, it is important for us to give assurance on the cloud as well, that our service provider to whom we have outsourced our servers and all those things, they have put in adequate controls in place. So what we need to do in cloud governance, guys, we need to ensure that the contractual viability through continuous review, improvement, and benefits. And why continuous review, improvement, and benefits? Because when we initially enter into contract, it is based on some assumptions from both sides, both from the client and the cloud service provider side. And as years passes, both realize that some of the assumptions need to be fine-tuned. Yeah. And hence this continuous review has to be there so that this contract is a win-win situation, and it continues to be a win-win situation for both the company, client, as well as the cloud service provider. I think it includes an explicit governance schedule to the contract. Governance schedule has to be there, which means there has to be laid down that what type of controls this cloud company will implement, and at what service and at what frequency it will provide the governance related details to the client, so that the client is also satisfied that whatever internal controls I wanted, they are working fine. Then manage the relationship to ensure that the contractual obligations are met through SLAs. SLAs are, guys, service level agreements. And depending on which service has been, what all have been moved to cloud and which type of servers are on cloud, you may agree on different service levels. For example, for your front end systems, where suppose you are taking orders, you may like to have maybe 99% uptime. Yeah. For maybe backend systems where you pass your JVs and all those, you may agree on 95% or maybe 90% service levels. Yeah, uptimes. Why less and why more? Because with higher service levels, guys, the cost, the fees charged by the cloud service provider, it increases. So wherever it doesn't harm you with slightly lower SLA, it is okay, because ultimately in every business you have to manage your cost. Yeah, and hence it's a cost benefit game. Next is identify and manage all stakeholders, their relationship and expectations, so that there are no surprises later on, and both the client and the cloud service provider, they both know what all are expected from each other. And few more, guys. So you will get the copy of these slides. So the idea is that whatever internal controls you would have otherwise, you would have preferred to have in your own setup, you put a mechanism by which your cloud service provider, that company, provides you comfort that I have put in all those controls in place. Yeah. So this is these are 6 or 7 mechanisms which we follow to ensure that the cloud governance has been adequately put in place. So guys, these are few topics I wanted to cover in this video. If you have any question, any doubt, please put it in the comment section below, and we will be happy to respond as soon as possible. And with that, thank you so much once again, and see you in the next video.